You are listening to the unscripted, unfiltered, 100% authentic. I'm your host, Michael, and happy 4th of July to the United States of America, to all of us here in this great nation of ours. Happy 4th of July. Hope you all have a wonderful and safe holiday. And for all those out there, including myself, that had to work today and gonna get one day off on this weekend, we'll make it through. I promise you. But without further ado, hopefully these storms will not knock out any issues along the way. But I think we should be good to go. But nonetheless, I got a fun show with you all today. Hey, let's talk some college football. Of course, as many of you may know, I am a diehard OU fan. And I know I get it from all you OSU and Texas fans. Last year was rough. I totally get it. However, we're entering the big boys next year, and so now we got to talk some big boy football. But let's kind of put that to the side just for a little bit. We'll talk that here shortly. But without further ado, I have a huge honor of having Randy, who is a part of the Damn Beast Media podcast and a big time Georgia fan, but also he's an alumni. So hey, you can't go wrong with that. Of course, two-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. Randy, welcome to the Air Raid Attack. It's an honor to have you. Looking forward to talk some SEC football and college football in general, and have some fun.
Michael, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, for all the listeners out there, tell you a little about yourself and your podcast. If you're not listening to them, here's a great way to get to that makes no sense. Get to know them. Great podcast, especially if you're an OU fan. As we head into the SEC here in the next year, definitely check them out. But Randy, tell a little about yourself and your podcast.
Yeah, we launched Dan Beast Media back in February of this year, complete with the YouTube and all the socials. So if you're looking for us, just type that in. Surely we'll pop up. But it's essentially a passion project, is what it was, because we settled in. I've spent my career as a sports journalist, and I've done that for 25 years. So when I decided to do a Dan Beast Media, I wanted to do it for me, not necessarily as a job. So I'm coming at it with the perspective of a fan,
Right.
But with 25 years of seasoning, in locker rooms and press boxes and places like that, the game is clearly going to look a little bit different just because of, where I've been, what I've seen. So I hope that comes across when I'm talking to you guys as fans, and especially people that are new and aren't necessarily Georgia fans. I hope that you can find what we're talking about and find it relatable. And like I said, we're just churning it out over there on the YouTubes, and having a lot of fun on TikTok and doing all kinds of fun stuff like that. But we're all dogs all the time, and we talk national stuff when it's relevant to what we're doing. But I do try to keep it Georgia centric. But everyone's welcome, to come check us out and see what we're all about.
Definitely. So, all you Sooner fan, I know I got you out there listening. Give them a follow on any social media platform. Subscribe on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, we're all live on Facebook and YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. I'm going to try my best, guys, to keep those comments, or at least try to keep them focused on. I wish StreamYard would do that on there, but that's perfectly fine. First things first, Randy, not to put you on the hot seat, but you guys are coming off of a phenomenal season. Again, winning another national championship, and practically you guys, I don't know what the right word is, pretty much dismantled the Big 12 and the TCU Horned Frogs, which I wasn't surprised. But to many, I know TCU played a phenomenal game against Michigan. Of course, had a great season themselves. But of course, winning the national championship, Randy, and now potentially 3 years, try to go for a three-peat, which is, really tough, even repeat itself. Obviously you're not going to have back, and, you're looking at quarterback Stetson Bennett's not going to come back. You got, on the defensive side, Jalen Carter, Christopher Smith, Kaylee Ringo, I believe, as well. From your perspective, I know early on, we got a lot to dive into. Kind of obviously recap quickly 22. I mean, you can't go wrong with the undefeated season, but I mean, there's really nothing to say. But quickly recap, but kind of what's your key positions and key points for this year's team as we head into the 23 season here next month?
Well, let's start with 22 because that season, I mean, obviously, I loved it as a Georgia fan,
Right.
but there is some argument about, what sort of statement did Georgia make doing what they did? And I'm on record on other podcasts and places like that as saying, yes, they went 15-0, but I still don't think that on the whole, nationally, Kirby Smart is given enough credit for what he was able to do with that team.
Right.
Because regardless of how it looked from the outside, if you're watching that unit as closely as I am, you know very well that they lost players to injury across the course of the year. They had they were without AD Mitchell virtually the entire season. They were without Arian Smith virtually the entire season. They lost Nolan Smith halfway through the year. They lost Smile Munden for 2 or 3 games in the middle of the year, and many others along the way. And it speaks to the fact that at Georgia, they have been able to recruit at such a level that they've built the type of depth that's necessary to sustain that program over the course of a season when you have those inevitable losses. So I think the players deserve credit, and I think Kirby Smart deserves credit for what he's built there to make that possible. And I mean, you're right, 15-0, national champion, conference champion. You really can't do any better than that. There
Right.
are a handful of 3 teams that have gone 15-0. So maybe, am I right about that? Clemson did it. Who
No,
else did it?
I think that is right. I think it was it because wasn't it
3 teams?
Clemson? Didn't Bama do it once?
That's what I'm unclear about. I don't know that Nick has had an undefeated season.
Let me find that real quick.
He hasn't in the playoff, well, unless you count the 2020 year.
Oh, that
So
might be.
that's not 15-0, right?
No.
It was like 12-0. But he still went undefeated. So, but my point is 15-0, 29-1 over the last 30, right? Back-to-back
Yep.
national titles, conference champions. You're right. It was a glorious season if you're a Georgia Bulldog. And it was glorious for me because being a Gen Xer, I mean, I grew up, I know completely what it means to have a 10-win season, beat your rival, and win a good bowl game and count that as a wonderful year. You know what I mean? And to
Absolutely.
see that Kirby Smart has been able to elevate the program above that, it is just like, it's just, I'm walking in high cotton. There's no other way to put it.
Yep.
And when you look to 2023, I mean, a three-peat hasn't been done since the 30s, and the University of Minnesota did that. So it hasn't been done in the modern era. It certainly hasn't been done in the college football playoff era, and it hasn't been done in an era where you have NIL, where you have the transfer portal. There's just so many options for these young men who may not want to stick it out when things get tough. So if the Dogs can roll out there, get back to Atlanta, win the conference, I mean, that would be a phenomenal year, in my opinion. And if they can continue to win in the college football playoff, well, I mean, I don't know what I can even say to that. You certainly can't expect that to happen. I personally respect the game too much to expect that sort of stuff from any team. I just know the game's too difficult. But if they can get back to Atlanta and win the conference championship and beat Florida first and foremost, then it's going to be a wonderful year. As far as positions are concerned, I mean, you mentioned Stetson. Carson Beck is the presumed favorite to take over the reins, and everything we've seen from Carson on the field, I understand it's just a spring game, but the reports out of practice, as well as everything that I've heard Carson say since the national championship, the way he's carried himself, everything leads me to believe that Carson is not only going to be the starting quarterback, but he's also going to have a really good year. And of course, all of these statements have to be couched with the fact that it's football. Injuries happen, things happen, right? And if those things happen, all bets are off. But if we're just, chalk moving forward, I think Carson is in position to have a wonderful year for Georgia at quarterback. If you look at the defensive side of the ball, yes, there were losses, but there were losses the year before, which brings us right back to that depth and overall talent level that resides in Athens right now. And I did a video on this just a couple of weeks ago. My live stream last week was about this, actually. There is a very real chance that the University of Georgia could have an All-American player at every level of the defense by the time we get to the end of the season.
Hmm.
You would have Michael Williams at defensive end or edge. He's classified as a defensive lineman and not a linebacker. So that's
Right.
how you get the D lineman. So Michael Williams, who is a freshman All American and a preseason All American. You look at the secondary or the second line, you have Jamon Dumas Johnson. We call him JDJ. He was an All American last year. He was a preseason All American this year. He was a Butkus Award finalist last year. But he's not the only one in that group of linebackers that could ascend to that level. Smile Munden led the team in tackles. Now, Smile missed 2 games last year and still accomplished that. He's dinged up right now. It looks like he might miss a game, maybe 2 to start the year. But he's another guy who has that sort of talent that if things go the right way, he could be in consideration as well at the end of the year. And then on the back end, Malachi Starks was a freshman All-American. He's a preseason All-American. Javon Bullard, preseason All-American.
Mm-hmm.
Kamari Lassiter, preseason all-conference consideration, could very well play himself into that position at corner. There is a real chance it could happen. Now, as a long shot, absolutely. Scheme, injuries, as we mentioned before, you never know how it's going to play out. But the fact that they have guys littered across those preseason and last year's postseason lists certainly puts those players at the top of mind. And I think that Georgia's going to be pretty doggone good on defense. I have said repeatedly that I think the 23 defense is going to be closer to the 21 defense than the 22 defense was. So make of that what you will.
That speaks volume because that 21 defense was really, really good. And I mean, I'm talking scary good. Of course, real quick, I know you mentioned it. I know we were talking about to begin. Three 15-0 teams: Clemson, Georgia, and I should have known this because we got ripped by them. LSU was the
Yes.
3 15-0 teams.
We
And then,
got
of course,
blitzed.
Alabama. You are correct. 13-0 in 2020.
That LSU team ripped us too in the championship game. They beat us up.
Yep.
But I don't know how I forgot Burrow. I don't know how that happened. But I think that team, and you could debate Clemson maybe, but I think the 19 team, or say the Cam Newton Auburn team, or the Jameis Winston Florida State national champions, those teams appear. Now, I'm not taking anything away from LSU. That's a phenomenal program, and I think in the long term, Brian Kelly and LSU are going to be a bigger threat to the University of Georgia and their position inside the conference than Alabama is if we look out a decade. So with that said, those teams, and especially the LSU team when it happened in 19, look at what happened the next 2 seasons, right? They fell off. So those teams were like catching lightning in a bottle. I don't think that's what you see with Kirby and the Dogs in Athens. I see a program that is just built, as he puts it, to sustain. And it's one of those things where he's a maniacal recruiter. The support is only ramping up due to the success that they've seen on the field the last couple of years. I think Georgia's going to be a problem in the SEC for a while.
Yeah, I think, and that was going to lead to the next question. I'm glad you brought that up. And a buddy of mine, we always talk college football, especially now more, I think, during the off season. I think in July, then we do really May and the after the spring season, or spring ball. Is what Kirby Smart's got going in Athens, Randy, is this the next dynasty? And what I mean by that is, could we start seeing Georgia and Kirby Smart being the Alabama that we saw the end of the 2000s, headed into the 2010s, and periodically throughout that decade, of course, of course, 2020. But could we see Georgia being the next Alabama, and starting to? In my opinion, I think they passed the tide already. But could we see them being that Georgia of that decade? I mean, of that Bama of that decade. My bad.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like Kirby says.
Oh, no.
Injuries happen. But barring something like that going on, it's one of those things where, I mean, he said it at media days. He can say it better than I can.
We will not be hunted at the University of Georgia. I can promise you that.
That's the philosophy.
I love that.
That's the philosophy, and that's where we're going. So you will never hear me say, at least not right now, I'm not going to declare this a dynasty or anything else. When I think of a dynasty, I think it's about sustainability,
Right.
longevity. Can you do it year over year? Georgia clearly has had 2 really good years.
Yep.
And if you count back to 2017, right, in the overtime lightning bolt that cost them that national title game against Alabama,
Hmm.
uh, if you start counting there, well, then in 6 years, they've played for it 3 times and won it twice. That's a pretty doggone good resume, especially when you
Right.
stack up everything else. But if you start it in 21, which it has some merit, I guess, because we were coming off of the 20 season, which was, it was just sideways for so many reasons at Georgia and so many other places.
Hmm.
And you look at what Alabama was able to do in the midst of that and still go undefeated. I mean, that deserves some respect. So it just matters about where you started. But I'm not going to say that. I think you have to, if Georgia pulls off something like that, you win 3 out of 6 years, or you win uh, whatever, nicking them to 4 out of 6 years, you do something like that. Okay, we can have that conversation. But until that happens, I just think you have to take, just like Kirby says, you have to take every season as a completely new team, and you have to do the best you can do with that team. So that's really what I expect from my guys. I expect them to show up and play hard and do the best they can for the university, and we'll go from there. I mean, I don't know. How do you want to measure them against Alabama? Georgia fans don't. We're not concerned with Alabama.
Right.
Alabama loves to tell us that we are, but we're not, because just like the Alabama folks do with Nick, we trust in Kirby, right? And if he's teaching these young men and driving them with the fact that the only standard you have is the standard that we create because of who you're practicing against every day. If that truly is the standard, why would I care about what Alabama's doing? I'm worried about who's going to start at left tackle for us, right? I'm worried about who's going to be that outside linebacker who takes on that left tackle, So I think dynasty is a strong word, and everybody has a very, well, seemingly very fluid interpretation of what that means. Is Georgia a top 3 program? Absolutely. Are they going to
By
stay
far,
there?
yeah.
Are they going to stay there? Absolutely. Do I personally think that the University of Georgia is the best program in the country today? Yes, I do.
Oh,
Now,
absolutely. I think Georgia is top notch in every category right now in college football.
now that can change, right? It
Hmm.
it absolutely can change. If
Yep.
if Alabama rolls out there next year and goes 15-0, more power to them. At that point, they are the best program and the best team. And that's the position that Georgia currently holds, in my opinion. They were the best team on the field in the last season that was played, and they are in that position because they are currently the best program, right? They're doing all the things around it to make that happen. They are making the investments and doing all the little things. So that's why I credit them with that. But it's absolutely a fluid situation.
I'm gonna share these comments, Randy. They're my good buddies from the
I
Herb and
can't,
Raj.
because I can't see them, just so we're
You
clear.
heard me? That's why I was laughing at the one.
Okay. I
This
don't know
one, the
what we're about
last
to
one's
get in.
hilarious.
Okay.
The first one, Herb and Raj podcast. Shout out to them. They're good people and great friends. Kirby has built a beast, and he kept his team physically tough. That's why they will sustain this success. And then
That's
this,
right.
and then this one, I'm curious on how you're gonna act on this one.
Okay.
Georgia fans are definitely obsessed with Alabama. I'm a Bama fan praising Georgia, and somehow we still get brought up. LOL.
Okay. Well, that's fair, but the host asked me, so I'm responding to your question. And don't misunderstand me. I think Nick Saban is a fantastic leader of
Oh,
men.
absolutely.
I think he's a wonderful football coach. I have nothing but respect for him.
Yep.
And the same for the program that he's built. People used to ask me before Georgia broke through. So we're talking after Kirby Smart got there. Well, even before that, but we're talking about the current situation. So once Kirby got to Athens, people would ask me, who do you want to face? Because they expected that Georgia was going to win the East. So they're like, who do you want to play out of the West? And every year at that window, Alabama had been the previous national champion or the previous conference champion. And I would say without hesitation, I want to play Alabama. I want to play whoever comes out of the West because I want to win the conference. The conference championship is extremely important to me as a fan.
Right.
But I wanted it to be Alabama because I didn't want any question, right? I wanted to A, see where we were as a program, and B, I didn't want there to be any question if Georgia were to win it, who they beat. I wanted it to be hands down. I wanted to beat the best, right? So you're not going to find me bashing on Alabama. That's just not going to happen. I mean, I completely respect them.
No, and it's funny here, Randy, that here here in Oklahoma, it's funny how we get tired of Alabama. It's kind of like the New England Patriots. We want anybody in the Super Bowl but New England. We want anybody in the national title game but Alabama. We want anybody in the playoffs but Alabama. But at the same time, and I'm with you on this one, is the fact that you can't really argue what he's built at Alabama. I mean, I remember when Shula was there and Dennis French Young was there, and that program, I'm sure Herbert Raj probably remembers as well. Those years at Alabama are like nothing compared to what they've gotten go through now. I mean, those were some pretty bad, tough years, but I can't. I'm with you. You got to respect what Nick Saban's done. By far, one of the best to coach in college football, and Kirby Smart's right along with there. Georgia, I OU fans, I know. We were, I saw a tweet earlier about it that somebody tweeted about the 2018 Rose Bowl, and that one's still a stinger. But
that was a whale of a game. There's no doubt about that.
That was, and I'm not obviously bringing this up, or discussion about it, but that was the game that I've never that 21. No, well, that 21 Red River Rival was pretty shootout. That 2020 is what I'm thinking of. That one was a doozy, but I don't think it beats out 2018 Rose Bowl. But I think at the end of the game, I could not go to sleep. Not so much because we lost. I mean, that's, it is what it is. But the fact that energy, my whole adrenaline just boom, like literally just popped air. And it's like, how can I go to sleep on this? I mean, it's like, Lincoln, why'd you squib kick that thing before halftime? Anyway, but
that kick, I mean, there's a whole lot just from a Georgia perspective.
Oh yeah,
there's a whole lot to look at that in that game and say, wow, obviously for us, it was just tremendously important key moments that occurred. So that kick gave Rodrigo that opportunity, and he, drills it, changed the momentum of the game, and the performance from the guys in that game in the red and black, that at that point, all of Dog Nation, we wanted to know if they had what we hoped they had. And that was one of those games where it just declared to us, oh, this is right. These dudes are the dudes. And, even if they had lost that game, they did so much to just show that the university, was headed in the right direction, and the program was headed in the right direction, and that those players that were making all those plays in that game, like Chubb and Michelle and those guys, you see, obviously they've gone on to do great things in the league. But, I mean, it's, it just said a lot for Georgia fans too. It just worked out that it was positive for us, and the seeds of that, and what made what happened in the national title game for Georgia so painful was the fact that one of the biggest moments in the history of Georgia football, and especially under Kirby Smart, is when Sony and Nick and Lorenzo Carter and all those dudes decided that they were going to come back. And when they made that choice, that reset the trajectory for this program. So Georgia has a lot of people to thank, Georgia fans do, when it comes to that team and those decisions and those players and the way they went out and represented the university, especially against a school like Oklahoma, who we all had tremendous respect for. Yep. I mean, I don't personally believe in Lincoln Riley that much, because I see him as a one-trick pony. I see him as a one-sided kind of deal, like, not a balanced team. I'm not saying he's not a great coach or any of that, but I have tremendous respect for Oklahoma and the program and the history. And for Georgia to go out and play that way in that game, it was a serious point of pride for guys who, a program that was new to the block,
Hmm.
as it were, on the national stage right there.
No, absolutely. I mean, you got Oklahoma was that was their 18. We were in the 15, 16. I think was Auburn. That might have been 19. No, 16. I think was Auburn. 17 was what bowl game was 17 then. Anyway, but the point of the matter is the fact that yeah, that would be I don't know. Anyway, so but no, I
I heard
think
a crazy stat. Sorry to I
no,
don't
you're good.
before we get off of Oklahoma, I heard a crazy thing today, which I didn't know and I should have known. But if Oklahoma were to win the Big 12 in the final season this year, that would be the 15th conference title in this century. Is that correct?
That is correct. The first one. So Bob Stoops came in '99
Mm-hmm.
and won it, of course, in 2000. Then it was 2002, 2003. That's when we got lost. 2004, Texas won in '05. We won in 6, 7, 8. Texas 9. We won in 10. But anyway, yeah, that's and I lost track because I think we go three peats quite a bit. But yeah, we won. It'll be our 15th in this century, which would be more Big 12 championships, obviously more than national. We're practically double in nationals, and then I forgot. I have to find a stat, but it was like more Big 12 championships, and if not the entire league in itself, for some ridiculous number, and that's including Texas A&M and Nebraska, of course, when they bowed out. But yeah, that'd be our 15th. Which the Big 12 is wide open this year. I think Oklahoma, if they can get the quarterback situation better under control, and I think the defense would be better. I think the offense, especially the receiving core, losing Marvin Mims was a tough one. They bring back Austin Stogner, who's been a Sooner before, went out to South Carolina uh, with Spencer, and came back. I think that's a huge help. But if they can get those missing pieces, that was an issue last year. I think they will be perfectly fine. But yeah, 15, and hopefully that number 15 will be just a tad bit sweeter than the previous 14-1 was. Oh, we might have lost him. The Barrage, last one they have a show to do tonight. Georgia is the best, and they deserve that. Good show, guys. I am out. Roll Tide, and I believe we may. Yep, Randy's gone for a little bit. Technical difficulties, but we'll get that taken care of. Randy, the host of the Damn Media. Hold on here. Well, here we go. Maybe not. Anyway, that we had him for a split second. Randy, the host of a Damn, if I can actually talk here, Damn Beast Media podcast, phenomenal work. Everything Georgia, all day, every day, 24/7. And we will continue the show in hopes that Randy will be able to come back on. But of course, talking Georgia and Oklahoma football, Georgia and Oklahoma was scheduled, I believe, was week 2 of this year. And needless to say, that was, moved to a later date, canceled, if you will, simply because, of course, if you've been sleeping on the rock, Oklahoma is going to the SEC starting in 2024. We'll talk about the SEC conference schedule for Oklahoma and Georgia, and I would like to get, hopefully we can get everything worked out. Would like to get his take on that SEC football schedule for Georgia because it is in my opinion, one of the groups. I think Oklahoma's dealt a hand, but I know Georgia, of course, has a hand in that as well, referring to their conference schedule. I'm pulling up here really, really quick. Hopefully, we can get this going if the internet will be kindly to us. Georgia in 2024, we're going to obviously talk more if we're able to get him up. But 24, of course, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Randy's back. Georgia, Oklahoma, of course, we'll talk that. But You know,
Just to
to
let you know, sorry, you mentioned some storms earlier. We've got some boomers rolling through right now. We took a lightning bolt and bam.
I
That's
figured
a
that's
kid.
probably what it was. I was like, I kind
Yeah.
of kept moving, like it's not me. And I know
No.
because it's lightning, not bad, but it's raining pretty well, and I'm like, well,
So,
maybe the weather struck.
yeah, that's what it was. And my apologies. But it's like they
No,
say,
you're
live
good.
happens live. So here we go.
Pretty much filled in. Oklahoma, Georgia was in fact scheduled as a non-conference this year in Norman. Of course, that was postponed and moved to a later date. We don't know when. Which brought up, the factor of the 20. Real quick, I want to pick your head because I know Georgia got a. I watched your SEC reveal show, and that was really good, and I enjoyed. I like the literally from fan bases standpoint. Your thoughts on that. Well, let's talk 24 SEC, I guess. Oklahoma comes into play, Texas comes into play, the new boys on the block. Of course, I know here at least we do have some OU fans. Or I mean, I'm not saying we won't go in there and win some games, but I don't think in the beginning we're going to be undefeated because there are some delusional fans out there, Randy, that actually believe that we will go undefeated in the SEC in 24, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, I hope we do, but that's gonna be a tough one, especially with a brand new quarterback in play. But but anyway, so you know, your thoughts. One, when you found out the news, and it was a quick, rapid go. I mean, literally, I didn't know anything about OU going to the SEC, let alone Texas. But the rumors that somebody is supposedly from Texas A&M, OU and Texas is going to the SEC. Now, whether or not that was true at the point, they were trying to, I don't know what they were trying to do. Obviously backfired, and literally, literally, it was the gun went off, and here comes OU, here comes Texas, here comes the SEC, and within 24 hours, it's boom, 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 OU Texas is in. And so your initial thoughts on OU Texas going to the SEC from a Georgia standpoint, and also from a SEC standpoint, as a fan of the SEC in general, and of course UGA as well. What are your perspective when you first heard the news that Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma and Texas, highly a lot of tradition both within their programs. I think Oklahoma beats them out just a tad bit, but I got to respect somewhat to Texas. Not really. But to our stepbrothers, what was your first initial of OU and our stepbrother going to the SEC and being a part of, in my opinion, the best conference in college football?
Well, the news broke last off season, so I guess for the general public, it may have taken people by surprise. There had been rumblings in SEC land that something was about to happen. So when the news actually happened, I wasn't completely floored.
Right.
But when they started talking about how quickly they were going to come into the league, the window of how things were going to move, I was like, wow, okay. So we're serious. We're going to make it happen. And from a national perspective, it's like I said earlier, I have tremendous respect for Oklahoma and I have respect for Texas. I will say this though, whenever Texas A&M and Texas used to play their matchup, I always pulled for Texas A&M, right?
Yep.
I always rooted against the Longhorns. When Oklahoma plays Texas, generally it goes the same way. Like I'm rooting against the Longhorns. I'm rooting for Oklahoma. And there were some tremendous Oklahoma teams that had tremendous players along the way that were just phenomenal to watch. So it wasn't too hard to, as a fan, root for Oklahoma in those games. But and you mentioned earlier that sometimes you get tired of the same team winning, Alabama winning, or whatever it might be. There was a window, like you said, in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s, right there, where as a Georgia fan, we were winning 10 games. We were competing in our conference, but we always looked at Oklahoma as, man, they're just always there. Maybe when Bob Stoops leaves, somebody else can wiggle in and get in the game. So I mean, I have tremendous respect now, and it's just there's a certain amount of cachet too for both of those teams. Just the brands are good, the logos are good, so it's just fun to think of them coming into the conference. So the thing that I I think we're pushing it, right? But that's the way of the new college football. But I do love the fact that the SEC has been able to maintain regionality when they're adding the schools that they have chosen to add to the conference. And in doing that, the SEC is the only conference that is engaged in realignment in a serious way, that has managed to not only maintain traditional rivals, but also rekindle and strengthen others. So with Texas and Oklahoma both coming into the league, clearly that gets to continue. Texas coming back into the conference means now they're going to play A&M. That's going to happen every year. That's going to be fantastic. And if you look at the other things that we've done, we've been able to maintain Georgia, Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Auburn, Alabama. You know, there are things in here that just need to not go away. And we've been able to do that inside this conference and maintain. One of the things that I love about college football is the reason that I prefer college football over the NFL. If I'm just going to sit down and watch a random football game, I would rather it be a college game than an NFL game for that very reason. Bragging rights matter. And when you keep the schools regional, it just adds that extra layer for us fans, right? Because now you know, and and you can educate me a little bit here, because I talk to a lot of people who run in Big Ten circles,
Right.
and the way they handle football is different than the way the SEC handles football, meaning the footprint. Okay. So, like here in the South, you have spring football every year. You're practicing all summer, 7-on-7. You're in the weight room. Everything revolves around football season, even at the high school level. Whereas in the Big Ten, a lot of schools don't even have spring ball, right? So, or a lot of states. So, it's just not the same. The focus, the intensity focused on it is not the same. So I feel that Texas is very much in that vein. I would assume that Oklahoma is much like your new brothers, and that you take it seriously, and that, you know, it's an all year kind of thing. So from that perspective, I think obviously it's a very natural fit. Oklahoma and Texas take it very seriously. They're coming into a league that takes it very seriously. And yeah, okay, you may not go undefeated in your first year in the conference. I would say I wouldn't bet my mortgage on that if I were you.
No. No.
But at least you know the game, right? When you sit down to the table, you're like, okay, we might have to do some things to, you know, level up. And I don't know your program that well, but you can identify that for yourself. But you're like, yeah, we got to level up. But at least it's not something completely foreign to you, right? It's not we play 7-on-7 all season, and then we line up against an SEC school and get punched in the face for 4 quarters, right? It's not this, it's different. Now, I think earlier when we were talking about what makes Georgia sustainable, what makes Alabama sustainable, what I think Brian Kelly is attempting to do at LSU, what I know Shane Beamer is trying to do, what I know they're trying to do at Kentucky, is they understand that it's not just the great players in the conference. It's the fact that you have depth and great players. So the third group that rolls in is as good as the first group. Well, maybe not like first round draft pick good, but they certainly can handle their own. They have the right body type. They have the right skill set, right, to where you don't see this drastic drop off. So as OU and Texas come into the league, I think it's just that simple. It's not about scheme. It's not about the coaches at this level. What I mean, and I'll explain. It's about, do you have the right pieces to play the game in the conference? And so Texas and OU may have to level that up a little bit, right, along the lines of scrimmage, particularly the defensive line. But when you're in that top tier where Kirby, Nick, let's throw, for argument's sake, let's throw Big Ten schools, Michigan, Ohio State. Yeah, because especially Ohio State, they have been recruiting at that level. So when you know you have the pieces, that's where the coaching comes in. Can you motivate the players? Do you make the good hires at assistant? You know, do you know the game to make the crucial timeout call when you need to, or whatever. But there's a certain level of entry. There's a certain cost to even get in the game, and I think that might be the biggest road bump as Texas and Oklahoma come into the league. It's not that they don't have great players or great coaches or any of that, great support. They absolutely do. Wonderful history. They might need to, just beef up the lines of scrimmage and that depth that I was talking about. And then we can talk about, competing at a conference championship level. And that again, no disrespect there. I just think that's what's going to play out.
Well, no, I think, and that's the right thing. When you're recruiting, of course, you can always have the argument, well, Lincoln recruited offensive players that fit his system. That's what he recruited. The biggest thing was Lincoln, I think, and nobody really is going to know why Lincoln left Oklahoma and Southern California. We don't really know. And is there some truth that he probably got scared? And, from what I heard behind closed doors is the fact that there's a lot of things that went behind closed doors that probably many people don't know. But one of them was the fact that, it was about the Jordan brand, what he can and can't wear on the sideline. That was an issue. And, the biggest thing, from my understanding, was the SEC. Nobody approached Lincoln about the SEC and got his input and this, that, and something else. And of course, I could see where, if that is true, I could see to a degree, like, well, I'm the head coach of Oklahoma. Why wasn't I included? Well, no offense, Lincoln, but like Bob said, there's not one person, bigger than this brand. So, you look at Oklahoma as a brand, I think they're fine, but recruiting is still going to be the biggest thing, I think, for Oklahoma. I think I'm going to contradict myself here because I've said on multiple episodes that I like the Venables hiring, but I would have went with Dan Lanning. I just would have. That was my guy I really was hoping for. But, defensive wise, we'll be fine. I mean, obviously he knows what it takes to win the SEC, even though he was with Clemson. But hey, he faced the Alabamas, he faced the Georgia, so he knows what big boy football is. And so, he's been there, done that, winning national titles at Clemson. So he's been there. But the offensive side, can Jeff Lebby recruit what it takes in the SEC? So far, so good. I mean, obviously, we'll find out in years' time. But, facilities has been another one, especially in, non-football related. But, I know the football stadium is going to get some big-time renovations after this year. But, you're looking at baseball, Dale L. Mitchell Park. You're looking at we got brand new softball, which I think the softball team's going to be perfectly fine regardless of where they land up at. But I mean, they're just too good.
Yeah.
The LNC, the Lloyd Noble Center, the basketball arena, that needs to be worked out. But no, I mean, facility wise, if long story short, Randy. So my dad's an OU alumni, and so the LNC was built when my dad was a freshman, and now he'll be 65 this year. Built when he was a freshman, and the same seats that he sat in is the same seats that still exist. So the LNC is old and ran down, and that's where we're at. So, facilities wise, I think the facilities is the biggest thing. But recruiting and all in general, I think in other sports, I mean, I don't follow deeply like soccer. I mean, I know we're, but softball, I'm not worried about. Baseball. Basketball, I'm really concerned. I think in the SEC, I think they're going to have a tough time competing in the SEC.
Really?
Yeah. And here's why. You're looking at a team that finished second to last or dead last year in the Big 12 that overall failed miserably in the NCAA tournament. They kind of faltered out really quick. And so the men's programs just really hasn't been the same. You got Sweet 16, Final Four was in 16. Blake Griffin, when he was there, the Elite Eight that year was 9 or Sam Bradford won the Heisman in 8. So I think that was 8. I think was a final Elite Eight. But the basketball team really hasn't had that great a program. They don't draw people. Number one, they don't draw people. Last year when we beat number 1 Alabama, when we stormed the court. It was hilarious simply because, 1, that was not our best team. 2, we beat the best team in college basketball, regardless of what people say. And that was our last, really, really, really good win. So basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, I think is fine. But going back to football, I think the defensive line, I think the O line's doing fine with Coach Bill. The D line, I think, is fine. They just got to beef up some. Got to get some mean guys, kind of like the 2000s with Oklahoma, Tommy Harris and Dusty Dvorak and Jared McCoy and all. Get those mean guys, nasty guys that just want to hit. I think that's what Oklahoma needs.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, those names you rattle off, if those dudes are in Oklahoma, they are not in Athens,
No,
right? And that's the thing. There are only so many of those body types. There are only so many dudes that can do it that way at that size. And you pointed to recruiting, and the thing, and you'll just have to let me know because I'm just not that familiar, right, about the Big 12 and how it works inside the conference and who you're competing against for recruits. But inside the SEC, I mean, it is shark infested waters, right? Like it never stops when you're recruiting. So when you look at a team like Tennessee, which is a wonderful historical brand, they've been kind of lost in the wilderness, right, for the last decade or so. And they've been a mess in a lot of ways. But one of the reasons that they had that issue was because when they won their national title in 98, that team was loaded with dudes from Atlanta, right? From North Carolina, from South Carolina. Then Dabo shows up at Clemson. He starts to get those dudes to stay home. He starts pilfering Georgia and North Carolina and going to Florida for those elite players at wide receiver and things like that. And you still had Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, all the traditional South Carolina, all the traditional schools right there that are vying for these type of players out of this footprint. When more teams are good or on the come up rather, that just means that a school like Tennessee, who their state only turns out 3 top flight athletes each year, maybe from a national perspective, it's hard for that school to compete unless they can recruit beyond regionally, which is nationally. And once you start that slide, it's hard to maintain that national presence. So when I look at a school like Oklahoma, yes, Texas is right there. So there are crazy players there. Louisiana's there, crazy recruiting there. So it seems to me that there are players that are in the footprint. So we don't even necessarily have to talk about a national recruiting philosophy here that they could go after. But now they're head to head on the recruiting trail with LSU, with A&M, with Ole Miss right there, with the Georgias who are going to go, Alabamas who are going to go try to get whoever they want. I just, it's really, there's just not that many players to go around. And the recruiting game, especially when we're talking about that depth, right? The multiples, not 1 or 2 guys, but multiples. Development becomes crucial. And can you win your fair share of those like crazy difficult recruiting battles, which is what the SEC is all about. So I'm just interested, do you think Oklahoma is going to be more like an A&M, right? And have some success in what they're doing and what they're pitching and who they can get? Or do you think they might end up more like a Tennessee? Because I don't think of Oklahoma when I think of a state that pumps out top tier talent. Now, again, maybe I'm wrong, and I know Texas is right there, but it just seems to me that, like, if you look at Georgia is churning out Division I NFL players, right, at every level. So Georgia can't take them all, right? Going to get some Alabama, you know what I mean? That's how it goes.
Yep.
You're not going to get every player. So when you look at Oklahoma, I mean, how do you see that playing out? Do you think they're going to do okay? Or is it really just going to come down to, do we have a guy who's recruiting in Venables who can make the pitch and get the guys?
I think Oklahoma, the biggest thing, and I like that question, Randy, is because, this past week there was a question that Bob Stoops was on the local radio station, sports radio, and the question was asked that a lot of people believe, and I think it's Colin Coward is one that really started the whole fire brigade, but is Oklahoma the next Nebraska 2.0? The question, We went from a national power to now you're on the verge of being non-existent, so to speak. You're just another team in the woodshed. And Bob Stoops, I liked his answer. And I think we're seeing this more and more, and simply because right down the street from me, and many people probably, especially if you live in Oklahoma and you're listening to the show and watching it, you're going to know exactly where I live. But right down the street from me is a school by the name of Carl Albert High School, one of the best 5A schools in this country. I don't know, maybe that too, in the state. And we just had a big time quarterback transfer out of wasn't Arizona, Texas, I believe. Transferred up here. He's a committed to Oklahoma. They got the one of the best running backs in the state committed to Oklahoma, and that's what I like to see with Oklahoma. Simply because, and here's why: under Lincoln, Bob, he did okay. I don't think he did too bad. Gerald McCoy was a Southeast High School kid in Oklahoma City, so he's a local product. Sam was a local product out of Putnam City North. You had some locals here from time to time. But the one thing that Lincoln failed, and I don't know if this was maybe the state of Oklahoma as a whole didn't realize that maybe we should do better, but Lincoln never attracted Oklahoma kids. He always went for the home run Cali kids, the Arizona kids, the Spencer Rattlers, the Caleb Williams, and these big top notch kids, Mario Williams, who went out with Caleb to USC. And Raleek Brown, who's a Cali kid that went back to Cali to be with USC when he decommitted from OU because of USC. But OU under Lincoln never really recruited Oklahoma. That's what I like about Brent. And Brent came out to say, hey, I'm going to recruit within the state because we're missing the point. There's still some good kids. They may not be 5 stars. There ain't many 5-star kids in Oklahoma. That's going to be 5 stars. But, I can name Jinx High School, Tulsa Union High School, Bigsby, which hasn't lost a game since I don't know when. They're just dominant. Carl Albert High School, Bishop McGinnis, Millwood has produced some products. Douglas from time to time will produce. But we got the smaller schools. I don't know, I'm randomly off schools. Like, what the heck are you talking about? But, the smaller schools, the Alex, the Jones, the Luthers. I mean, some smaller schools, I can see his name. I can see his face. I cannot see his name's on the top of my tongue. He plays center now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh my God. Come on, Michael. Seriously? Oh my God. Oh, Humphreys, Creed Humphrey.
Okay.
He's from Shawnee, Oklahoma kid. So one thing about Brent that I like that he admitted he's going to do is attract more Oklahoma kids. Obviously, he's still going to go outside of into Texas and into the, at least he's got an East Coast presence from his days in Clemson.
Right.
So that helps. While back, Oklahoma expanded into, I think Florida was the first time they've ever got a recruit out of there, and East Coast, up in the Northeast, Washington and all them. But, Randy, long story short is Bob, practically saying, oh, he's not going to be 2-point on Nebraska. He says, we got Dallas, we got Houston, we got Austin, we got Texas. So, compared to Nebraska, what you got? You got Lincoln.
Right.
Well, everybody else is not going to Lincoln because there's nothing else out there. So I think Oklahoma, well, if they don't watch themselves, they could be. I don't think they will be Nebraska. But recruiting-wise, I like seeing Brent. It really means a lot to me personally because, we're an Oklahoma kid. There's a lot of talent in Oklahoma. They're not 5 stars. There'll be, quite a bit of 4 stars. But, this running back we just got, I think is, he's a stud. And so quarterback's really good. So I'm glad that Brent's finally going local. That doesn't mean he's going to stop going to Georgia's and all them, but he realizes sometimes you got to go local. And you never know. This local team who knows what they're going to do in the SEC. But, recruiting, I think, is going to be still the biggest thing. I think that's when the NIL comes to play, regardless of everybody's thoughts on it. That's another whole topic. Is it good for college football? Is it not good for college football? Does it take, out of these other schools? Who really knows? But Oklahoma, at the end of the day, I agree with you, is the fact that Oklahoma's still going to have to recruit. They're still going to have to somehow, some way, get these big, nasty kids on the D-line, O-line, linebackers. Hey, here's, Georgia and Alabama, they've won the last decade practically. But here's why you should come to Oklahoma. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know what the selling pitch is. I don't know. Um, but they still got to recruit those big time kids. I mean,
Yeah, well,
like you said, there's only so many to go around.
if I'm not mistaken, there's a 5-star edge player right now that Oklahoma's in the mix with Georgia for Inwaneri. He's out of
Yep.
Missouri,
Mhm.
maybe.
I think he's out of
So,
Missouri.
so yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to try to go get the best players. And with
Right.
Venables being a defensive guy, it doesn't surprise me at all that he's going to have a good pitch, for those guys. It's just, and again, I know I said it earlier, but it's worth making the point. If we're talking about coming into the SEC, if that's the thing that teams that are not in the SEC and fans of teams that are not in the SEC that they don't really appreciate or realize. And I always couch that by saying, and why would you? It's not your conference. You wouldn't know because you're not watching it that closely. But
Exactly.
the difference between um, the difference between the top tier teams inside the conference and the teams in the middle and then at the bottom, they all have players that are 4-star players.
Mhm.
The difference is Alabama, LSU, Georgia, whoever's on top, whoever that happens to be, they've probably got 8 defensive linemen that can play every Saturday. And Vanderbilt, they're trotting out that one guy, and then he's got his buddies that are, Johnny Tryhard. And I mean no disrespect, but they're just not the same caliber of player. So you might have 2 stars and 3 stars lining up next to this 1, 4, or 5-star athlete at Vanderbilt, whereas at Alabama, you're going to have, all those dudes are going to be 4-star dudes, and development is just crucial because I know I look at Georgia and I follow their recruiting. I'm not a recruit Nick, but
Right.
I do follow it. And to see when Georgia offers an offensive tackle, for example, that has the correct body size, but may only be rated as a 3-star guy, I do not bat my eyes at that at all. And when they offer him in May and get him to go ahead and commit, I'm like, yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I don't care. I don't care what some recruiting group says his star rating is. That tells me that the coaching staff has worked the kid out. They like his body type and they know that they can develop him to be the kind of player that they need him to be. And if you're Georgia, all you have to do is point to the recent drafts and say, look,
Mhm.
what we're doing. We're recruiting players. But if you can get those dudes, like you said, you can take a 3-star player and turn them into, an NFL draft pick. It's absolutely
Mhm.
possible. You just have to have the staff and the coaches that are, that know what they're doing and are willing to do that. I mean, just look at Georgia, David Pollock, who was in the news this week. That's a 3-star dude, played fullback at Central Gwinnett, right here. No, South Gwinnett. Sorry, South Gwinnett, right here, about 30 minutes from my house. 3-star dude, sort of an afterthought. And then what was he? 2-time, 3-time All-American,
Mhm.
right? NFL draft pick. So it's about in those cases, it's about development, and that's just has to be a part of your program. You need the talent. You have to develop. Even the 5-star dudes have to be developed in terms of how to work. You know what I mean? What does it take to win? And that is a lot of the difference between Mark Richt, Georgia, and Kirby Smart, Georgia. Georgia had wonderful players in the Mark Richt era, but it's those extra things. It's that push. It's that work, doing the things that the other guys aren't doing that's mattering, that's making the difference right now for Georgia. And again, Jordan Davis, right? First round
Yep.
draft pick. Some people said he should have gotten a Heisman invitation. That dude was a 3-star dude out of North Carolina that, was viewed to be overweight out of high school. So
Mhm.
development matters.
Well, no, and that's perfectly right because Oklahoma, for example, Coach Bendenbow, our offensive line coach, one of the best in college football. I mean, what was back in what was it 2018? I think is the year that we won, whatever that award is for the top O line. Might have
Gilmore
been
Award.
19,
Yep.
but it speaks volume because it goes back to that. I'm not a huge guy on he's a 5-star. Let's see how many 5-star guys we get coming. And I won't lie, I was scrolling through here real quick, just seeing who in the past decade who was 3 stars that went on to be NFL picks, and then I ran through two, the 2014 and 2015, and there was two offensive linemen. That was Orlando Brown and Cody Ford, who Ford's a phenomenal player. I believe he's still with Buffalo. I know NFL kind of goes around and around nowadays. And of course, Orlando Brown with the Kansas City Chiefs. So who just got done winning Super Bowl. So I mean, development matters, and that's where the great coaches come into play. I think Brent Venables is going to get this thing turned around. He just the only bad, and I'm going to, it's nothing bad towards him or toward Oklahoma. Unfortunate with OU fans, I'm sure throughout time you'll catch on pretty quick, Randy's. We're very impatient. I really don't know why, but we are. We win by 3 points and the world ends. I mean, I don't understand this, but I think if Oklahoma struggles again this year, I don't know. I'm sure OU fans will want Brent Venables' head off. I don't, that's well, heck, Bob Stoops loses 2 games a year. They want him gone. Lincoln, Lincoln, that was at least he had that, but Lincoln won a lot of games, and he can't win the playoff. He needs to be fired.
Right.
Okay, touche on that. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of universities out here that want to be where Oklahoma's at, want to be where Georgia's at, and even if they don't win every, we year in and year out, that at least we played for the national championship, or we were in the Final Four, whatever. So no, development matters, recruiting matters. I think Oklahoma's going to be perfectly fine. Are they going to have some growing pains in the SEC? Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Randy, you guys better get ready because we're going to come in there and beat the, what? No, come on, guys. Hey, if we go in there year one and go undefeated, hey, we got the right coach now. But no, I think we'd be perfectly fine. I will still go out on Mike and say that I was a Dan Lanning guy, and he was my top choice. I know Brent is home for us. But sometimes you got to go out on the limb. But no, I think we'll be fine. Just OU fans, you're out there listening. God, for the love of God, be patient. We'll be all right.
Well, I can promise you this. The OU fans are not the only ones who have a quick trigger. I mean, for goodness sake, like they want to fire Ryan Day at Ohio State. So,
yep.
He loses 2 to Michigan, and there you go. So, and that was Coach Rick's big deal, right? I mean,
Yep.
he would lose games against Florida and things like that. Lost a couple to Georgia Tech. The rivalries matter. But it's I think Venables. I like him. I always appreciated his defense when he was at Clemson, and when those teams won. Right, that's what they had: playmakers on offense and a just stout defense. So he knows what to look for. He knows who to go get. It comes back to, can you now get them when you're head to head against these major schools? And maybe they've always been head to head with these guys, But I just, from firsthand experience, I just know how cutthroat it is inside the conference for those players. It is dog eat dog, absolutely. So, I know OU has, I know the quarterback's coming back, and the defense has to be better because it wasn't very good last year. So, I think OU and Texas, honestly, I think it's great for those 2 schools that this year is not the year that you're in the SEC.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've got a year to get loaded for bear. And still implement your systems if these 2 coaches remain at those schools. Keep working on building your program, and then you'll hit the ground in the conference running, and you'll learn, and the league will learn that OU and Texas are not the Big 12 air raid, not to mention your name here, but
you're good.
That these teams are not those teams, if you know what I mean. They're coming in with a different body type, a different philosophy, and they're going to fit in just fine inside the conference. I'm not concerned about that, and I'm happy to have them, especially when you look at what the Big Ten is doing. Now, listen, I think if you had to go back in history and say who is messing up college football, it's probably the Big Ten, right? When they go and poach the schools from the West Coast, and it destroys that regionality that I was talking about before. That's just my fan take, okay? That's just me as purely speaking as a fan. But if things are moving, And I don't believe that the SEC moving forward is going to add schools as a knee-jerk reaction to
No.
respond to what anyone else is doing. I think they will continue to add only when it's value added for the conference. So in the future, will expansion happen? Probably, maybe. I just don't think that the SEC is in any hurry to do that. And if they were going to move right now, I think that OU and Texas were the best two options that were on the table.
No, I'm with you on that one. I think right now, I think Oklahoma, Texas is probably obviously their best choice. And I think that they probably would have at the same time probably brought them in all at once. I think you always hear Clemson's name being mentioned, and I guess geographically, I guess you can fit that in there. But long table, do they can they win? And that's the thing, and we have to think is, well, it's Clemson. They're doing phenomenal ACC, but can they keep the trend in the SEC? I guess you can say the same for Oklahoma they've had obviously a lot of success in the Big 12, and especially since 2000. And can they do the same in the SEC? I think eventually they will. And Texas has, and as much as I don't like our little brothers, I think that they'll have success in the SEC. Win, who knows? But I think Florida State was name brought up. I think that the SEC right now is perfect. But I'm with you on that one from just a flat out, fan standpoint. I'm not even talking about OU in general. I think from the standpoint, I think it's hilarious that Lincoln Riley bounced OU because they were leaving for the Big 12 for the SEC, and the contrary that they're now bouncing to Pac-12 for the Big 10. I think that's kind of hilarious. But I mean, to each its own. But I think it is ruining college, and I shouldn't say ruining college football, but it's making it really different, especially that West Coast brand, because that Pac-12 is a special kind of brand compared to what the Big 10 is and what the Big 12 is and the SEC. I mean, the SEC is obviously the big boys on the block. The Big 12, we just don't have defense. Nobody has defense, so we just score 60 points, and whoever the first one to 70 points really wins the game. That was a fun ordeal with Texas Tech, but Big 10's that ground and pound, low scoring affair. Very rarely will they crack 20 points, so to speak. But it's going to be interesting how this all plays out next year. USC, UCLA, I don't really see them being a Big 10 school, but whatever. Going out there, it's going to be interesting from a fan standpoint. Yeah, it's going to murder it. But
I'm on record as saying that if you just look at the trajectory of money, right? So the television deals that are driving the Big 10 moves, the television deal that the SEC has that will be renegotiated in the not too distant future. And you look at which schools bring in the most money now, which schools are having success now, what they spend on recruiting and facilities and upgrades and things like that. And then you look at a conference like the Big 12 and what the Pac-12 is going forward. I'm on record as saying I don't think the Big 12 ever wins another national title in football. That doesn't mean TCU can't be really good. It doesn't mean that another school or two can't come up there and play with them and, be a national program that's respected. But when they have to go head to head against schools, either in the Big 10 or in the SEC, I just don't think that they're ever going to be able to make up that difference because things begin to compound at some point, right? And the teams that are out in front stay out in front unless the system changes. So I think the Big 12 is in danger of never winning another football national title, even though they played for one last year, but we saw how it played out, right? So, and I know one game is not the rule, right? And that game could have played out a bunch of different ways if things had gone differently, but we saw what we saw, So just on the hoof, you look at the athletes that Georgia had versus the athletes that TCU have, and they just aren't the same down the roster, if you know what I mean. So I think that's one of the issues that the Big 12 is going to have in the future, and we'll see what the Pac-12 or Pac whatever they turn into can be moving forward. For the Pacific Coast, I think Lanning at Oregon is doing his dead level best to recreate what he saw in the SEC, and if he can pull that together, that program at Oregon is going to rule the roost out there on the West Coast from everything I can see. Doesn't mean that the other schools, Washington, can still be good, but the way he's the body type, the philosophy, that sort of stuff that he's doing out there, I think Lanning's ultimately going to be very successful.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think Big 12 as a whole, I think is you're going to see the end. They may not fold up like we thought they would. Obviously, with Oklahoma, Texas leaving, like, oh, the Big 12 was like, what are we going to do? A lot of teams were like, we're gonna should we jump? Should we not jump? Of course, Big 12 rallied together and brought their pom poms and brought in 14, which is four teams that I thought was pretty interesting. You got the Central Florida, you get the more Florida market, Cincinnati, Houston, which is a big market, and of course BYU out west, which was interesting, but I still like to pick up. But I don't, top to bottom, Randy, I just don't see them. Who can be that team? Can TCU keep the consistency? We've seen Baylor, Oklahoma State. They can't. Poor Mike Gundy, to an extent, poor Mike Gundy, our little brother. They just can't. The spotlight's too big for him. But other than that, that's all you got in Big 12 now. I mean, so in Central Florida, they claim that they're still national champions in 2017. So to each its own on that thing. But
well, the Big 12. Notice I didn't say that will not be a very entertaining conference. I mean, the football will probably be really good as far as on a competitive level across the conference week in and week out, because all those teams are sort of right there together.
They are. Yep.
And I don't know if anybody's going to be able to separate, right? So that would be the thing. But that doesn't mean the Big 12 won't be great college football. I think it will. I just don't see them as stepping up and taking on a top tier school from, and beating a top tier school from the Big Ten or from the SEC moving forward. And it's all cyclical. You're not going to win every year. Georgia's not going to win every year. I mean, we're talking about a three-peat earlier. The ball is shaped funny and it takes odd bounces. Stuff happens. That's fine. Yep. As a fan and as an alumni of the program, what I want is to know that they're doing it the right way. They're investing, they're working hard, and we take our shot, right? That's all you can ask, especially in this conference. That's all you can do. Get to Atlanta, take your shot, right? Yep. That's where it starts. And then once you start to win, you just, as a Georgia fan, you just be thankful that you got that W, like, awesome. We did that, man. And then they went back out and did this thing again the next year, which I didn't let myself believe that was even possible until we got down halfway through last season, so I just wouldn't let myself believe it was possible. So, I mean, I'm hopeful for 23, but I will never take it for granted. And so all I can say is just, come in, enjoy the ride, and don't let, some perceived failure. Don't let your pride be hurt if you lose 3 games. You could lose 3 games to the 3 best teams in the nation in this conference. So you can have an outstanding team and an outstanding year and still have 3 losses. That's how it is.
No, absolutely. Speaking of 23, as we wind down the home stretch, you're looking at 23 schedule for Georgia and Tennessee, Martin, Ball State. Of course, that was the replacement game for Georgia when Oklahoma was the team that went to the SEC. Then you get South Carolina, which would be a little interesting simply because Coach Beamer is a great guy. He's got that program rolling. Spencer Rattler seems to be maybe a better quarterback than he was in Oklahoma. We'll see this year for year 2 for him. UAB, of course. Then you go to Auburn. You get Mark Stoops in Kentucky at home. Then you go to Nashville for a nice trip for that because you got Vandy, which whatever. Georgia, Florida and Jacksonville. Of course, you got Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee on the road, Georgia Tech on the road.
Right.
Looking at your schedule for you guys, is there any, non-conference wise? I think you guys are perfectly fine. I don't see an upset at all in that thing. Conference wise, is there any team? I know Florida can always, but you don't know what kind of team you're going to get out of them. Does that Knoxville trip to Tennessee for you guys this year? Did that kind of give you a little worrisome because Josh Heupel's got them in the right direction in Knoxville?
I can walk you through and let you know kind of what I'm looking at. So South Carolina is always a game that the Gamecocks are up for. They, they are all about beating Georgia. That's one of those rivalries that's a little unbalanced. They think it's a bigger rivalry than it is, right? From Georgia's perspective, speaking historically.
Mhm.
No disrespect, that's just the way it is. So they're always going to come in jazzed up. I do like what Beamer's doing there. I don't think they have the roster to make that happen in Athens in
Right.
23. So moving ahead to Auburn. Auburn, that one, just keep an eye on, just because you will learn Auburn is a very hard place to play, even when they're not good. If they are good, it is a downright snake pit to go play. So Hugh Freeze, say what you will about the man, they are going to be better, and they're going to be dangerous because of what they do. And if they start to believe in themselves a little bit, that could be a little dicey for first time starting quarterback, that sort of thing. So just keep a lazy eye on Auburn. That one's tricky. Kentucky, at the end of every year, at the what do they call them? The when the coach sits down with a player, and they talk about the season and where they are in their career and that sort of stuff.
Oh, kind of
Um,
more like a come to Jesus type of thing.
Well, whenever they do that at Georgia, year after year under Kirby Smart, the team that is mentioned as the most physical and difficult team to play is the Kentucky Wildcats every year. So I'm happy that game is in Athens because Stoops, they play physical brand of football. So that one, Kentucky wants to take a step up. I don't think they have the roster to get it done, but it is a physical fight whenever, Kentucky comes to town. Vanderbilt is Vandy. They are not in a position right now, you would imagine, to be able to pull off any kind of thing. Florida, I hate the Gators, so we can never beat Florida badly enough. That's how that is. So 40 to nothing is looking good to me. They're a mess right now. So again, I just think the roster is a mess. I don't think that's a game Georgia should win. Missouri's at home. Missouri is probably, I just think Missouri is going to be a little bit sneakier than folks think this year, as far as how many games they're ultimately going to win. But I think Georgia should win that game at home. The Ole Miss game, this ending stretch is a little tricky. So you travel to Florida for the neutral site, and that's a big emotional game. You come home. I just said I think Missouri might be a little better than people think. Then they get Ole Miss. We won't know what Ole Miss is until we get here because, they did so much in the portal and things like that. That team could be really dangerous, especially when Tennessee looms the next week on the road. And all you're going to hear is that's the game of the year in the SEC East, Georgia, Tennessee. That Ole Miss game could be tricky. If they know what they're doing, that game could be, one that might jump up and bite the dogs right there. Ole Miss. Tennessee, yes, you would point to that game and say that's the toughest game on the path back to Atlanta. It's on the road. But Georgia has dominated Tennessee the last 3 trips to Knoxville. They've won by an average score of something like 41-12 or 38-12. It's something crazy like that. And it just comes back to the roster, right? So, and I think that as good as Tennessee was last year, if you look at who they have this year, I think it's inevitable that they take a step back. Doesn't mean they won't be a really good team. Just means that they won't be 11-1 good or 11-2 good. They might be 9-3 good. So that's a dangerous game for sure. But the thing to know about Georgia is that no one has ran the ball consistently against the Dogs for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Certainly not the last 3. They're giving up fewer than 80 yards per game on the ground. If Tennessee cannot run the football, then you make them clearly one-dimensional, and those things that they like to do don't work, which is exactly what you saw last year. So unless Tennessee shows us they can run the ball against Georgia, I'm going to hang my hat on Kirby, JDJ, that defense, and think that, Georgia goes up there and gets that win. So Ole Miss could be tricky. Tennessee is going to be tough. Auburn and Kentucky are going to be more than maybe people think they're going to be. But you're right. The odds are good that Georgia's going to be able to navigate that and make their way back to Atlanta this year to play in the big game. And my running joke this entire spring has been, ask me next week who I think is going to win the West, because depending on the week, I have a different team. One week it's Alabama, and the next week it's LSU. And it just, I mean, Alabama has the best roster. LSU, though, beat them at home last year. They are developing what they're doing down there and are on the rise. So it just depends on the week you ask me who I think is going to win the SEC West. I'm not sure. Either one of those teams are going to be great, though. I have no doubt about that. I don't think that there's a team in the West like an A&M or someone that's going to step up and leapfrog one of those two. I think A&M has to be better. And like I said, Auburn could be dangerous. I just don't think, and it's the same for Ole Miss, but I just don't think that at the end of the day, any of those schools are going to leapfrog either LSU or Alabama. So I think those are your favorites in the West.
Would it be, how much a surprise? I know the SEC, of course, for the most part, it's pretty, you got your top teams and your bottoms kind of beat each other up for the love of it. Would it be, how much of a surprise would it be if let's say July 3rd, let's say play devil's advocate, if I was to tell you, Randy, July 3rd at 7:57 p.m. Central for the SEC would be Georgia and LSU. How much would that be? Much of a surprise or not really?
Well, no, it wouldn't be, because like I said, you might get me to say LSU's going to win the West and it won't be close. Because I mean, Alabama, again, top to bottom, that roster is really nice. And we know what Nick is capable of doing as far as, changing his scheme to fit his personnel. People are worried about Alabama's quarterback with good reason. And also you don't see a game breaker, an established game breaker at wide receiver, which is what Bama has been the last handful of years. We don't know who's going to be the dominant running back. My money right now is on Haynes working his way in to be the starting guy by the middle of the season. So can they still win it, though? The answer is yes, because, again, they can change how they play the game, do enough to win, let that defense carry them. They can win the West, especially when they get LSU in Tuscaloosa, right? I think where you play these games matter. So, like, Texas coming into Tuscaloosa, same thing. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about Texas, but I wanted to say this. I was perusing one of my preview magazines just to look and see top players nationally at positions and stuff. I heard Urban Meyer, which don't get me on Urban Meyer, okay? But he made the statement that Texas could have the best roster in the country. First off, bunk, okay? So let me say that. But secondly, if that's true, I don't see these lists littered with top players at any of these positions. I think I saw a guy at tackle or something like.
I was going to say, if I'm sure, because I usually read the Athlon Sports and I haven't got a chance to do that yet. But usually for Texas, it's usually that up front on the offensive line, or you may have a guy or two on the defensive line or linebacker, stuff like that. But for Texas, I know they have. I'm sure. I mean, I don't know, obviously, what the inside scoop of what Steve Sarkis and what they feel like, and this, that, and something else. I know, but roster wise, I know, offensive wise, I think they returned 9 starters. I know, the biggest loss though, I think, and I saw him in person. Unfortunately, it was my first Red River rival game, and we didn't even score any points, so that wasn't very fun. But Bijan Robinson, the running back, I think that's going to be the biggest key loss for Texas, and I think that's the biggest hope for them. I mean, I don't know who they got backing up. I'm sure Jonathan Brooks would be my opinion, would be the biggest. I would imagine the starter for that offensive line, for that offense. But Texas, and I'm not bashing them because it's OU Texas. I got some respect towards them. I don't like them. I don't, I despise them, and it sucked that we didn't score any points last year. But it's Texas still hasn't grasped what the identity is what I'm looking for, the identity of Texas football, because they fired Mac Brown. Then you bring in Charlie Strong. Then you bring in oh, what was his name? Whatever his name. You bring in somebody. I forgot what the other guy's name was after. I can see him face Charlie Strong, but then you get Steve Sarkisian, and I know he had a pass as it was anyway, but you got your two wideouts. I know Worthy is one, and I can't think of the other kid's name, but I know that they got a Georgia transfer. I know they got him, but
Right.
Texas really just overall receiving core. I think they'll be fine. Their biggest one I think is gonna be at running back core, but it seems to me every year that the quarterback situation is really always been the issue. I don't know why. Um, I'm looking real quick through their defense, just trying to get some type of a feel on them. Looks like defensive wise, they're going to come back perfectly fine. So maybe Urban Meyer knows something that we don't. But again, Texas hasn't won a Big 12 championship since 2009, and I don't know. I'm sure just because of who they are, I'm sure that they would be the favorite to win the Big 12. I think Oklahoma's probably up there, probably top three, I'm sure at least. TCU lost quite a bit, but I don't know. I think Texas, to go out on a limb and say they probably got the best roster, I would beg to differ on that one. But
Yeah, me too.
yeah, I don't see that.
And if they're rolling into Alabama, right? I'm just making the point about
Right.
Alabama at home. Obviously that's a very difficult place to play. So,
Mhm.
um, I would not be surprised though. I said earlier, I think LSU long term is the greater threat to dominance in the conference for Georgia than Alabama is.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that I'm knocking Alabama. I just think that LSU is ascending. And regardless of how healthy and fired up Nick is, at some point there's a change coming sooner rather than later. And the hire they make will determine whether I have to reevaluate that statement. Because I think Kelly's going to be there for another decade, just if we have to assume everything goes as it should. And I think that program, again, I mentioned the recruiting in Louisiana. They can go into Texas. They can come into Georgia. There's no reason LSU cannot be just really, really good over the next decade. So I'm not surprised at all if it turns out to be LSU in Atlanta. And, then it's just my squad versus their squad, right? And none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. I think that's something, especially in these talking months, that's what college football fans get wrapped up in. They forget none of this happens in a vacuum. So it's not, is Georgia as good as the 22 version or the 21 version? It is Georgia better than anybody else in the field right now? And that's the way you have to look at it. And so the same thing can be said for Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, right? Anybody that you might toss out there as a contender for the national title, or if you're talking about LSU, Alabama, here inside the conference, it's about how do we measure up right now, not about who we are or how historically great we've been, right? So it's what do you have on the field on Saturday, and that's going to determine who wins. So if you look at the Big 12, I think Texas has to be the favorite just because of viewers. I would love to see somebody beat them. I expect that someone will. I refuse to believe that Texas is back and a champion of the conference until they actually do it. I think Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma, any of those schools right there have an opportunity, to have something to say about that. So, and I'm just not a believer in Sarkisian. Again, I view him very much like I view Lincoln Riley, which is you're really good as a coordinator, very, very good coach. I don't know if you're the CEO type to pull all that together and make it happen, but at the end of the day, if you got better players, odds are you're going to win. So if they do, in fact, have the best roster, then maybe they actually will win the Big 12 for the first time in 15 years. So
yeah, and I'm looking at the Texas schedule real quick. I mean, Rice and Wyoming, non-conference wise, should be perfectly fine. Alabama, Tuscaloosa, I'm sure it's going to be a night game. Okay, 6 p.m. kickoff. So night game in Tuscaloosa. That's going to be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to watching that one, honestly.
Yep.
Baylor on the road. Baylor's always a team that just they they always have one game. I think this could be the game that I know they bring back quite a bit. Kansas, and it's sad that I already talked about Kansas because they're the laughter of the Big 12. But Kansas brings back the quarterback that's done phenomenal last year. Should have beat Oklahoma. I think there's a lot of few other games that they should have beat. So you never know. Kansas, last time they went to Austin, they upset them. Just so you know, Longhorn fans. Oklahoma, you just don't know what's going to happen with the Red River Shootout. I went to the game last year that was made history with the first shutout or worse defeat, I should say, for OU football. So that wasn't very fun. But again, when you're we just ran the ball. I don't understand our play calling, so whatever. Houston, I don't expect much out of them for year one. BYU, I wish it was in wherever they play at. I wish it was at BYU. That'd be an interesting one, but I think that could be interesting. Kansas State, though, I can't ignore them. I think Kansas State, they have Oklahoma's number. They've gotten Texas's number, even with Charlie Strong for the last decade. So that should be a doozy. TCU on the road is going to be interesting. Iowa State, I don't expect much. And then Texas Tech should be interesting a lot. I know there are a lot. And and then I look at our schedule real quick. Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa, non-conference. I'm not worried about that. Cincinnati on the road. Shout out to my boy D'Artagnan Tinsley with the Bearcats. We'll be on the podcast in the next few weeks. Shout out to them. That should be interesting game on the road. Iowa State, again, I don't really expect much out of them this year. Texas, you just don't know what's going to happen. That could go either way. Or Central Florida for Oklahoma. Central Florida, I know, has that name that they're trying to build that. Gus Malzahn's the head coach and trying to get that program back to where they were when Josh Heupel was there and Scott Frost was there, and so you never know. Kansas and Lawrence. The last time Oklahoma went to Lawrence, Caleb Williams practically stole the ball out of the defender's hand just to avoid us losing. So, and then for the final time, Bedlam, our little brother, we get to farewell them packing, hopefully with the W. The last time we went to Stillwater was the very last game. Lincoln Ryan was head coach, and I'm not going to worry about that one. West Virginia, it's going to be interesting. We've had their number for the exception of last year. Come to Norman with only beating us once since they joined the Big 12. BYU and Provo, Utah, and then TCU the Friday after Thanksgiving is going to be interesting. I think both schedules, setting up OU, Texas, heading into the SEC, it's a pretty favorable to make it really in the Big 12 title game. Like we could easily see them both in the Big 12 championship game. I think Kansas State has a chance. I think it'll probably be your top three big dogs, but it's going to be interesting. Really, I really want to see how these two teams really just fare out in the final year, because the teams on the road, real quick, when they go on the road, I can just imagine hopefully a hostile environment, knowing that this is the last time they're going to Stillwater to whatever. I can just imagine what it's going to feel like, because I'm sure there's some fans out there that's ready for OU and ready for Texas to come up to their stadiums and play them, because I'm sure they got some choice words for them.
Yeah, that part should be fun if you just think about it in terms of fandom. That should be a fun ride.
Last question as we wrap up, Randy. It's plain and simple. I mean, we're not worried about 24 right now, but I'm ready for 24. I don't know about you, but my question for you as we wrap up, nothing really too major. Are you counting down the days for OU Texas to join? Are you going to enjoy the final, what we would consider the final year of the 14-team league SEC? Or are you actually, like me, I'm ready more? Can we just surpass this year to get to the SEC? Or what's your reflections on 23 as we head into 24 and the new expansion of the SEC?
Well, seeing as how we are already here and we are just awaiting the arrival of those two schools, I would just have to say I'm not so much looking to skip past 23,
Right.
But I'm absolutely looking forward to 24. And 24 is going to be such a crazy ride because of so much change all at the same time. Because
Mhm.
not only do we have the new teams coming into the league, same in the Big Ten, but we also have the playoff, which is coming,
Yep.
which is an entirely it's an entirely different discussion about
Oh
whether you think
yes.
that's a good thing or whatever. But there's just going to be so much churn in that 24 year. It is going to be very interesting to see who is going to rise to the top in the conference, and how it's going to shake out across the conferences like the Big 12 and the Pac 12, where those schools are leaving. There's just so much that's going to be happening right there. So I'm absolutely looking forward to 24, but I don't want to just skip past 23, mostly for the things that you just said.
Right.
So as a football fan, every week I'm going to get to enjoy SEC football, Georgia football,
Hmm.
but I'm absolutely going to pay more attention to the Big 12 than I've paid in a decade,
Interesting.
easily, because I know that Oklahoma and Texas are out there
Hmm.
swinging and battling it out. So I'm going to be like, oh, I'm actually going to have a rooting interest in those games. Maybe not a rooting interest, but a more of
Right.
an interest than I've had in the past, because generally speaking, I'm only tuning in to watch the Big 12 if there's a potential upset brewing or something like that.
Right.
Just because I'm focused on my schools, right? I want to watch Kentucky play Florida or whatever it
Hmm.
is. Um, so yeah, as a fan, I'm excited because now I have more tempting games that are out there. Um, and it's one of those things where knowing that a game like uh, the Red River rivalry, right, one of only two
Hmm.
neutral site games in the country,
Yep.
Florida being the other,
Hmm.
knowing that that's both of those games are going to reside in the SEC, and that's pretty doggone cool. And I hope that those things can continue. So now that, I mean, it was on my list anyway, because I have Oklahoma friends and things like that, that if it ever worked out, maybe I could go to that game. But now that they're in the conference, that ticks it up a level. Maybe I make a plan to go to that game, right? Because they're a
Hmm.
conference opponent. So in that respect, I'm very much looking forward to 2024. But 2023 has surprises untold. I'm certain it will deliver, just like college football always does for us. And hopefully, we can get to the end of this thing in 23, and my Dogs back in Atlanta for the championship game. And like I said, we'll take our shot and see what happens beyond that. So that's where I'm at. I'm looking forward to it all. I'm a college football guy,
Yep.
so bring it on. That's what I say.
Oh, I love college football, and if you ever need, if you ever get the chance to visit, I don't know if you've ever visited Oklahoma or let alone Norman, but I got season tickets, so if you happen to come into Norman just one random week, and let me know, and I'll be glad. But OU Texas, that's a great, regardless of last year's outcome. That was a pretty cool environment. I never got to experience in person. It's a whole lot better, obviously, watching it, but it pretty much what I thought it was. It was one of the best rivalries in college football, and half and half, and I can send pictures and everything else. But no, definitely, if you ever come to Norman or that Texas OU game, by all means,
Well, I'll tell you. I
I
mean,
can.
first off, that's a tremendous offer. So thank you. Let's start right. That's some hospitality, right? Just some
Hey,
in-conference hospitality. But I will say, I honestly thought, and I did this on my preview when I sketched out my preview for 24. I thought Georgia was going to come and play Oklahoma in 24, and the
yep,
fact that you're going to go to Austin threw me for a little bit of a loop. I'm like, why not play that game since you?
exactly.
So at some point, that's a game, and my wife is a huge college football fan too. So
Very
when we
nice.
talk about traveling to Austin or to Norman or these
Hmm.
cathedrals of college football with all this great history, these are places that I promise you we're excited about having an opportunity to come and visit. So, and you are not going to find a better college town than Athens, Georgia, anywhere in the country. Even going to Nashville to check out Vandy,
Hmm.
right? That's a fun place to go visit. So, going the other way, I think OU and Texas fans are going to have a lot to look forward to as they make their way through these SEC schools.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know I got some Arkansas fans that's hey, you gotta check out Fayetteville, which it's only a 3 hour drive from me. So, of course, farther out east would be a lot better. But Herbert Raj, we're doing they're Alabama. We're doing a live on site podcast episode next year when Alabama comes to Norman. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
it's just, I'm looking forward to it. But hey, we just got a few more, we just got one more season before we can, really dive into, but hopefully 2025. OU Georgia, I hope. I don't know how that's going to look like, but we'll see.
Well, I was glad to see you pop up those comments on the screen earlier. I'm going to have to go check out Herb and Raj. I don't know their stuff. So that's going to be one of those things. That's why I wanted to come on, was to sort of get to learn, about what's going on with the other schools in the conference by talking to people who follow it closely, follow
Absolutely.
their team the way I follow mine. So I've had a blast being on talking all this football. I've kept you way too long.
You're good. I've actually done. There was one show and had no intentions. It was way past 2 hours, and I've yet to listen to that show again. I don't know if I'm ever going to listen to that show again. So, final comment as we wrap up the show from Herbert Raj podcast: Georgia is the best, and they deserve that. Good show, guys. I'm out. Roll Tide.
Fair enough.
Randy, it was an honor having you on. A blast to talk some college football, especially Georgia, and hearing your thoughts on your Bulldogs as we head into the 23 season. Last time, where can they hear you and listen to you and find you as we wrap up the show?
All right. Well, like I said, we are A Damn Beast Media. You can find us on YouTube at A Damn Beast and across all the socials: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at A Damn Beast. The only one that's different is Instagram. You have to put media on the end of it. So A Damn Beast Media on Instagram. But the rest are just A Damn Beast. I also have a website at adamnbeast.com where I blog and do other fun stuff. So if you're interested in any of that, if you're looking to level up your Georgia knowledge, check us out, hit us up. I'm very quick to respond. So, if you like to chit chat on Twitter, hit me up there too. We'll get it done. And the only other thing I can say is I was so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And who says it better than Kirby Smart?
So how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.
Yeah. So there you go.
I love that. I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy of A Damn Beast Media joining us, talking all dogs 24/7, all day, every day. Randy, it's an honor having you on. We're going to do it again as I may meet you at halfway point, get your reflection on the college football world, but we'll do it again. But thank you so much for coming on, and have a happy 4th.
Yeah, man. Everybody stay safe out there and enjoy the 23 season. A lot of changes coming in 24. Don't look past 23.
You absolutely. You've been enjoy the moment, though, you fans, and I guess you two little brothers from Texas. Enjoy the moments. We are ending this show. You've been listening to the Air Attack podcast. Listen to us on all major podcast platforms. Find us on Twitter at Air Raid Podcast and Facebook and Twitch, and listen to us there. However, have a happy 4th. We will see you all, guys, same place, same time next week. Take care.